Welcome to Tech Week in Review with Adam Eve. We're looking at the week of December 1st through the 7th, and we're going to break down the source material to get to the core of what actually happened.
And it was quite a week. It felt less like a few small updates and more like the actual foundations of things were moving.
Right. It felt like tectonic plates shifting. We saw these huge moves in media that, the basic plumbing of the internet kind of stuttered for a bit.
And governments all over the world started drawing these really sharp new lines in the sand about who gets to control the digital space.
Exactly. And when you look at it all together, we're not just talking about, a new phone or a new app. These are fundamental shifts in power. We had this Hollywood consolidation that just went to a whole new level. The AI rivalry it turned into an all-out infrastructure war.
A very, very expensive one.
And then you have governments trying to build guardrails for tech that's just moving way too fast for any legislation to really keep up.
So our goal here is to give you that bigger picture. We're going to pull out the most important bits of information to understand not just what happened, but the why behind it all.
Yeah, and what it means for you, the person actually using all this stuff, your data, your entertainment, even, your physical safety.
So we've got a lot to get through.
We do. We're going to start with that battle for sheer market dominance, how the media giants and AI titans are fighting it out. Then we'll get into the, let's call it the messy consequences of that AI race.
And we'll finish up by looking at how these new digital borders are going up everywhere and how the physical and digital worlds are smashing into each other. Sometimes it works, and, well, sometimes it really, really doesn't.
Okay, so let's jump in with that theme of corporate scale. This is where big money decides who owns the future.
And you have to start with Netflix. I mean, that was a story that redefined the entire media world this week.
It really was. In terms of pure dollars and cultural impact, this was massive. Netflix is acquiring Warner Bros., Discovery's TV and film assets.
For $72 billion.
$72 billion. That's not just buying a company. You're buying a whole era of culture with that.
It's the defining moment in the whole streaming wars story we've been watching for years. You had every studio trying to pull their content back, launch their own thing, HBO Max, Discovery, Plus, you name it.
Right. Everyone wanted their own little walled garden.
Exactly. And this deal just says, that's over. The fragmentation strategy failed. Netflix won the platform war, and now they're just buying up all the best stuff to put on it.
And when you look at what they bought, it's just staggering. This isn't some niche library.
No.
You're talking about all of HBO's prestige TV.
Yeah.
That's a huge cultural anchor. The entire DC universe, and maybe most importantly, the Harry Potter franchise. That's a global money-making machine.
And putting all of that under one roof gives Netflix this almost unbeatable monopoly on content that people really care about.
So what does that break down to strategically?
Well, getting HBO gives them that high-quality prestige library that justifies a premium price. And then having DC and Harry Potter, that's your evergreen global IP for blockbuster movies and spin-offs for years to come.
Okay, but let's push back on that a bit. $72 billion is a monumental number, and it was done with a lot of financial leverage. Doesn't that huge debt load put this incredible pressure on Netflix to just churn out content, cut costs, and maybe sacrifice some of that quality they just bought?
That is the big question. That is the essential counter-argument. You have to feed this giant new machine, and that means you have to be more efficient.
Which usually means less money for creators, fewer risks on smaller projects.
It often does. But from the corporate point of view, that $72 billion price tag is a defensive move. It's a moat.
How so?
By owning the distribution platform and the most desirable content, you raise the barrier to entry so high that the idea of a new competitor coming along and challenging you on that scale, it's just not possible.
At least not anytime soon. The sources were saying by 2028, there might only be a few global players left.
Exactly. So the message is pretty clear. The streaming war is over, Netflix won, and now it's the Hollywood of the internet.
And it's not just because of their tech anymore. It's because they own the supply chain of culture itself.
Precisely. And that kind of consolidation, that blueprint, it isn't just happening in media. We're seeing the exact same thing in the infrastructure underneath it all, the AI arms race.
Okay, let's pivot to that. The fight between OpenAI and Google just hit a whole new level of intensity this week. We heard that Sam Altman issued what they called a red alert to his team. And the interesting thing is, This wasn't about the philosophical safety stuff he usually talks about.
No, this was pure market share panic.
It was all driven by Google's Gemini model catching up so fast.
And that's the key thing to understand. Altman often frames this competition in terms of, responsible development and safety for humanity.
Right.
But this red alert was about business. It was about money. Google's Gemini isn't just another good model, it's a strategically deployed threat to their bottom line.
And that strategic deployment is Google's real advantage, isn't it? OpenAI has to kind of negotiate its way onto devices.
While Google already owns the entire ecosystem.
Exactly.
They're not just releasing Gemini as some standalone chatbot, they are aggressively pushing it into everything they own.
And the scale of that is just hard to comprehend.
Think about it. Android is on billions of phones worldwide. Workspace is used by millions of businesses for everything from email to documents.
So Gemini gets instant distribution on a scale that OpenAI can only dream of, even with Microsoft helping them.
It's a perfect flywheel. Gemini gets smarter because it's integrated into the tools people actually use, so it gets more real-world data.
And people adopt it faster because, well, it's just there. It's already in their phone, in their email.
And that brings us down to the most critical part of this war.
Yeah.
It's not just about who has the best algorithm, it's an infrastructure war.
It's about the hardware. And this is a direct challenge to Nvidia, which has had a near monopoly on AI chips.
Right. Google is going all in on vertical integration. They're betting on their own custom chips.
The TPUs, the tensor processing units, and this new Axion accelerator. So why is having your own custom chip such a big deal compared to just buying Nvidia GPUs off the shelf like everyone else?
It comes down to efficiency and specialization. When you own the whole stack from the silicon up, you can optimize everything.
Okay.
TPUs are built for one thing, the specific math that powers neural networks. Because of that specialization, Google can get things done faster with less energy than on a more general purpose chip.
So it's not just about raw speed, it's about the cost of running these things at a massive scale. And they're trying to double their capacity every 6 months.
Every 6 months. The ambition there is astronomical. That's why Altman issued the red alert.
You can't just buy your way to that kind of growth. You have to build it.
And by building it themselves, Google is trying to insulate itself from relying on a single supplier like Nvidia. They want to control their own destiny, their own costs.
And so this whole rivalry is now being fought on multiple fronts. It's the software models, sure, but it's also the chips, the cooling systems for the data centers, the physical buildings themselves.
The winner in this era won't be the one with the smartest algorithm. It'll be the one that can afford to build and run the most efficient data centers on the planet.
That's the real price you have to pay to compete at the top tier of AI.
It is. So if that's the scale of the fight, let's look at what that fight is actually creating out in the real world. And that often comes with some pretty big unintended consequences.
Okay, let's get into that. We're moving from the corporate boardroom to, well, the quality of what this stuff is actually spitting out. And that's where we hit this crisis of digital trust. It's centered around a term the sources are calling AI slop.
Slop is the perfect word for it. It really captures that sort of low-effort derivative feel of the content. The web is just being swamped with this stuff. AI-generated text, AI-generated images. It's not about creativity, it's just about volume.
And the immediate problem for you is that it's clogging up search results.
Yeah.
It makes it genuinely harder to find real information written by a real person.
But it's starting to creep into much more serious places. That's what's really worrying.
Like what?
We're now seeing AI-generated text showing up in academic journals and scientific papers.
Wow.
And that is a huge problem. The whole point of academic publishing is that it's supposed to be a gatekeeper for credible, verifiable knowledge. If you can't trust that a paper is based on actual human research,
Then the whole system starts to fall apart.
it does. The whole foundation of verifiable knowledge gets shaky.
And if that's the general problem, it gets actively dangerous when you start using deepfakes for something like public health.
This is the critical question, right? What happens when the slop isn't just sloppy anymore? What happens when it's polished and targeted?
You're talking with the deepfake doctors.
Exactly. These are highly realistic synthetic videos of fake physicians giving out medical advice. They look professional, they sound confident, they're incredibly persuasive.
And this isn't a theoretical problem. The CDC is now on record saying they're concerned about this.
They are. The CDC says this flood of convincing fake advice is making their job harder, especially during an emergency.
Right. Think about a crisis, a pandemic, a natural disaster.
In those moments, you need to get clear, trusted information out to people instantly. But if a huge chunk of the population can't tell the difference between a real public health official and a deep fake telling them to do the opposite,
You can't coordinate a response. Trust just evaporates.
trust becomes the most valuable thing there is.
Okay, but speaking of the weaknesses in these very sophisticated models, we have this just fantastic story that's both hilarious and also points to a huge security flaw.
The poetry bypass.
The poetry bypass.
It's a beautiful example of human cleverness finding a crack in a rigid system.
So set this up for us. The researchers found that AI chatbots are trained to refuse dangerous requests.
They have all these safety protocols. They're trained to screen for keywords and instructions that are illegal or harmful.
But the trick was so simple.
It was almost poetic.
Literally, if you submitted the bad request not as a plain command, but you framed it as a poem, a sonnet specifically.
The model would often just do it. It would bypass its own safety rules.
Why? What's happening there?
It's a conflict in its own programming. The model is trained to recognize and reward artistic expression. When it sees something formatted like a sonnet, its internal classifier says, this is art. And that seems to override the other rule that says, don't do this harmful thing.
And the success rate was crazy, something like 62%.
62% success rate in getting past the safety filters just by asking nicely in iambic pentameter. It's incredible.
What I love about it is that the exploit wasn't some complex bit of code. It was an exploit of the AI's persona.
Yes, you're tricking it by appealing to its creative side. It shows that you can spend billions on technical safety measures, and they can be defeated by simple, clever wordplay.
It makes you wonder if we're building safety systems that are just too literal. They understand the words, but completely miss the context when you wrap it in a different style.
It's a necessary bit of satire, I think. It shows how easily these complex systems can be fooled by artistry.
Well, while some AIs are being tricked into writing poetry, others are being put to work replacing human jobs. Let's talk about what happened at HP.
Right. This is where AI stops being just a neat tool and starts driving major corporate restructuring. HP announced some big job cuts.
And they were very clear about why. They tied them directly to a company-wide pivot toward using more AI and automation.
They weren't vague at all. They said about 6,000 jobs, mostly in areas like customer support and some development roles, will be replaced by automation by 2028.
They called it a structural reset.
And that phrase, structural reset, is corporate speak for a permanent change in strategy. It's an admission that they're reorganizing their entire cost structure around AI-driven efficiency.
And this isn't just an HP thing, right?
Not at all. We've seen similar moves linking job cuts to automation at places like Salesforce and Intuit. This is a real trend now.
So AI is no longer on the fringes. It's a direct economic force that's eliminating a substantial number of white-collar jobs.
Exactly. When you apply these tools at an enterprise scale, it puts enormous pressure on jobs that are repetitive. Routine coding, answering support tickets, summarizing data.
The middle layer of a lot of jobs.
That's the part that's getting automated. The workforce is shifting toward roles that are either highly creative or require really complex human-to-human decision-making. It's a huge change, and it's happening right now.
And that kind of economic pressure is exactly what's forcing governments to step in. Which brings us to our next segment. The rise of these digital borders. All this chaos from AI slop and corporate power grabs is being met with a really sharp regulatory backlash around the world. Let's start down in Australia. They've done something pretty dramatic.
They've started a mass social media purge. This is a huge enforcement action, and I don't think it's gotten enough attention.
What does that mean, a purge?
It means they've begun forcing platforms to remove accounts for any user they can confirm is under the age of 16.
But how do they confirm that? The old enter your birth date screen is a joke.
It is. So now, to comply, platforms are being pushed toward much more serious verification. Things like requiring a government ID to sign up.
Or facial estimation tech.
Or facial estimation, which is hugely controversial. But the Australian regulators are basically saying this is not up for debate anymore.
And what's their justification for a move that seems like a pretty big reach into people's digital lives?
It's a public health argument. They're saying the harm signals linked to kids using these platforms, everything from mental health issues to exploitation, have been ignored by the tech companies for too long.
So they feel like they have to take this drastic step because the platforms won't regulate themselves.
That's their position, yes. They see it as a failure of the platforms to protect children.
But there's a really interesting counter-argument coming from the platforms themselves. I think YouTube was mentioned.
Yeah, and YouTube's warning is really important to consider. They're arguing that if you kick all the kids off these big, public, moderated platforms,
They don't just go offline.
right, they might get pushed into the darker corners of the internet, unmonitored chat rooms, encrypted apps, places where they're actually less safe because there's no oversight at all.
It's a classic dilemma. Do you protect people by watching them, or do you risk them going somewhere you can't see them at all?
It's a very difficult problem with no easy answer.
Okay, let's hop over to Europe. The regulators there are less focused on who is on the platform and more on how the platform is manipulating them. The EU slapped X, the company that used to be Twitter, with a huge fine, 140 million euros.
And this is part of the EU's ongoing war against deceptive design, or what they call dark patterns. This fine was a very clear shot across the bow.
Can you break down what a dark pattern was in this specific case with X?
Sure. A dark pattern is basically any design choice in an app or website that's made to trick you into doing something you didn't mean to do, usually something that benefits the company.
Okay.
In X's case, the fine was for intentionally making it hard to tell the difference between a real post from someone you follow and a paid ad. They were deliberately blurring the lines.
And the killer part is the regulators had proof that it was intentional. This wasn't just a clumsy design choice.
That's why the fine was so big. They had internal documents from X showing that the company had actually tested different ad labels to see which ones were the most confusing to users.
And they picked the confusing ones on purpose.
Yes, because their data showed that when users were confused, they clicked on the ads more. The EU is sending a message that if you intentionally deceive your users for financial gain, there will be serious consequences.
This whole trend, the regulations in Australia, the fines in Europe, it feels like part of a bigger global shift toward what the sources are calling the sovereign internet.
I think that's the biggest geopolitical tech story of the week, maybe the year. The idea of the internet as one global open space is dying. Countries are now viewing it as territory that they need to control. They're building digital walls.
India is a really clear example of this.
Yes. India is trying to force all phone makers to pre-install a government scanning app called Sanchar Sathi on every device sold in the country.
An app that would let the government monitor communications. And Apple is pushing back hard on this.
Of course they are. For a company like Apple that's built its brand on privacy and security, being forced to install a government monitoring app is a nightmare. It compromises their entire security model.
So they're stuck between this huge growing market and their own corporate principles.
Exactly. And complying isn't easy. It means they have to build and maintain a completely separate version of their software just for India. It's a massive expense.
Russia took an even more direct approach, just blocking things entirely.
Yeah, Russia just blocked Apple's FaceTime and completely banned the gaming platform Roblox.
What's the real-world impact of something like that?
Well, it hits different groups of people. Blocking FaceTime makes it much harder for families and expats to communicate securely. And banning Roblox. I mean, that's a huge creative and social space for millions of kids. You're cutting them off from a global community.
So the theme is pretty obvious. Governments are setting the rules now. It's not the Wild West anymore.
Not at all. And for the big tech companies, this is a logistical nightmare. The cost of operating globally in a world of fractured, sovereign internets is just going up and up.
Okay, so let's shift gears now to where all this digital stuff actually meets the physical world. Sometimes it's amazing, and sometimes it's a complete failure.
Let's start with the amazing. A real moment of human progress with this Neuralink milestone.
This is a big one. It takes the tech from feeling like science fiction and makes it feel like a real, useful medical device.
We had a human patient, Rocky Stoutenberg, control a robotic arm using only signals from his brain via a Neuralink implant.
And the specific thing he did is what's so important here. He guided the arm to his own face and kissed it.
That's the detail that matters, because a lot of the previous brain-computer interface milestones were about, moving a cursor on a screen.
A two-dimensional task.
Exactly. Guiding a complex, multi-jointed arm through three-dimensional space to perform a delicate, precise action like that. It's a huge leap forward in the technology's capability.
So it's not just an input device anymore. It's a functional motor control system for the real world. This is huge for people with paralysis.
It completely changes the game for prosthetics and assistive tech. It proves the system can interpret complex, nuanced intent, not just simple commands. It's an incredible step toward restoring autonomy.
And that's the absolute cutting edge, which is inspiring. But for most of us, our connection to the digital world relies on infrastructure that's a lot less glamorous and, as we saw this week, pretty fragile.
The Cloudflare outage.
December 5th.
Yeah, that was a very powerful reminder of just how centralized and brittle our internet can be. Cloudflare handles a massive chunk of the web's traffic and security.
So when a key piece like that goes down, the dominoes fall fast.
They do. Instantly, huge services just went dark. Zoom, DoorDash, things people rely on for work and, for dinner.
It's the paradox of efficiency, right? We rely on these central hubs because they're fast and cheap.
But that reliance creates these massive single points of failure, and when they break, huge parts of modern life just stop working.
It really shows you that even with all the money invested in this stuff, the whole system is still vulnerable.
It's a constant trade-off for businesses. Cost versus redundancy. For us, it's a frustrating morning. For society, it's a real vulnerability.
Speaking of frustrating, let's talk about a company that intentionally made its user experience worse this week. Netflix.
The same Netflix that just spent $72 billion to buy Hollywood.
They removed the ability to cache shows from your phone app to a smart TV or a newer Chromecast.
This is such a classic case of corporate strategy completely overriding what users actually want.
So why did they do it? It wasn't because the feature was broken.
No, they removed it because it was getting in the way of two of their main goals, collecting better data and cracking down on password sharing.
Okay, explain the data part first. How does removing casting get them better data?
When you cast from your phone, the phone is the main source of data, and the TV is just a dumb screen. By forcing you to use the clunky app on your TV with the remote,
Which everyone hates.
they get much cleaner, more direct data from the TV app itself, data about your viewing habits, your network, your device, all stuff that's super valuable for their business.
And the password sharing link.
Forcing you onto the TV app means you have to be logged in on that specific TV, on that specific Wi-Fi network. It makes it much harder for someone in a different house to use your account. Casting was a loophole they're now closing.
So the awful experience of typing in a password with your TV remote is the price we pay for Netflix's corporate control.
That's pretty much it. They're degrading the user experience to tighten their grip on data and access.
The funny thing was, the sources said older Chromecasts from 2013 still worked.
A small, strange victory for people who hang on to old tech.
Well, we can at least end this part on a positive hardware note. Sony finally fixed that liquid metal cooling issue in the new PS5 Slim models.
This was a big relief for gamers. For context, liquid metal is an amazing coolant, way better than normal thermal paste.
Good.
But it's also electrically conductive, so if it leaks or moves around, it can short-circuit the whole console.
So the fix wasn't just a software patch. They had to actually fix the physical seal to stop the liquid metal from moving around.
Right, it was a fundamental engineering correction to make sure the consoles were reliable in the long term. A good reminder that pushing for maximum performance can create some really tricky hardware problems.
Okay, so let's try to pull this monumental week together. December 1st through the 7th. It really did feel like this big structural battle.
It did.
On one side, you have this immense corporate consolidation. Netflix becoming a media empire, the AI giants in this all-out war. And on the other side,
You have governments around the world trying to frantically build some fences around all that power.
that's a perfect way to put it. The internet is becoming less of a Wild West and more bordered,
Yeah.
more nationalized.
And at the same time, the very idea of truth is getting blurry as the line between what's real and what's AI generated just vanishes.
So looking ahead, what does this all point to? I know you see a huge new market forming around this idea of trust.
I do, absolutely. When you have deepfake doctors that are so convincing the CDC has to issue warnings about them and just this flood of AI slop, it means the next big wave of tech products, the next big economic opportunity is going to be all about verification.
Verification of what then?
Verification of everything on two fronts. First, platforms are going to be forced to prove that their content is authentic. Is that a real expert or an AI avatar? And second, you, the user, are going to be increasingly challenged to prove that you're human. The market for tech that can reliably verify identity and authenticity is about to explode.
That makes a ton of sense. And moving from the digital world to the physical one, we saw a couple of things this week that point to a real change in how our cities will work.
Two really key developments. Uber launched its robo-taxis in Dallas. So driverless ride-sharing is now a real thing in a major U.S. city.
And Archer announced their plans for air taxi service in Miami.
Right. And if you put those two together, you get a pretty clear picture.
Which is?
Dallas is becoming the testing ground for autonomous cars for the masses. But Miami is setting itself up to be the main testbed for urban flight.
Air taxi.
Air taxis. Probably for high-end customers at first, quick trips from the airport to downtown. But the groundwork for vertical mobility in cities is being laid right now in places like Miami.
So this pace just means we have to stay vigilant.
Yeah.
We have to watch our data, watch how fast the technology, like a brain-controlled robot arm, goes from a lab to a real product.
And stay super critical about whether the source of our information is even human anymore.
It demands a lot of critical thinking.
It does. And that brings me back to my favorite story of the week. The most entertaining, but also the most profound one.
Let's end on that. The poetry bypass. The fact that human creativity, a little bit of wit, was the key that unlocked a security system that billions of dollars in engineering couldn't protect.
Right. If all it takes to fool one of the world's most advanced AIs is to frame your request as a sonnet.
What does that say about the limits of pure engineering when it comes up against messy, clever, unpredictable human ingenuity?
It's something to think about.
Keep your minds open, look for those surprising cracks in complex systems, and stay curious.
We'll see you next week for another review.
Tech Week in Review is hosted by Adam Carter and Eve Harrison. Music by Federico Luyo, Jamie Wright, and Alex Grohl. Sound mixing and editing by Nigel Dixon-File. Tech Week in Review is produced by CTF Initiative in conjunction with TechFyle. If you are interested in more news, reviews, and articles, visit techfile.com and follow us on social media. If you like the podcast, please subscribe. Thanks for your support. Keep following TF and TWR for the latest in tech changing your world.